Hello everyone and welcome to week 1 of season 3 of Major League Balatro. Today we are going to be previewing all the games, going over the schedule, and doing the most important part of the previews this season, and that is the wheel spin, where we will decide the deck and stake for game 1 for every single match across the board for week 1. First things first, let's go over the schedule for week 1. So to kick things off, the first game of Major League Balatro Season 3 will be at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, February 10th. We have Feinberg versus Gothic Lord UK. Later that day, we have 2 more games, this time in the Bloodstone division. At 5 p.m. Eastern, we have DrSpectred versus MALF. And at 8 p.m. Eastern, we will have BelenosBear versus Sizaak. These are all going to be phenomenal matchups. Stay tuned for those. Then moving on to Wednesday, February 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern, we have my first game of the season, Zaino versus HCJustin. At 2 p.m. Eastern, following that game, we'll have Haelian versus Fur. On Thursday, February 12th, we have 3 games from the Onyx division. Kicking things off at 12 p.m. Eastern, we have NEATO versus Bean. 2 p.m. Eastern, we will have Edzy versus Nandre. And at 9 p.m. Eastern, kind of a nightcap for Thursday, we'll have Roffle versus Nemo. Nemo making her debut in Major League Balatro. Friday, February 13th, Friday the 13th, we have a scary matchup. We got Seadubbs, as they are known, also aka Seadubbs, aka Pico, taking on Vagabond for their first game in Major League Balatro after winning Minor League Balatro last year. And then we have kind of a quirk in the schedule just for week 1. We try and make sure that all games are played Monday through Saturday, but due to some scheduling conflicts, Skoottie and Rarran are going to play actually on President's Day here in the United States, Monday, February 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern. Just a note here, this means the fantasy scoring updates will be delayed. However, it's going to be the same thing. Next week, week 2, you still have to submit your lineup by Monday morning. This game and the fantasy points for Rarran and Skoottie just won't be inputted until after they play. So it shouldn't really affect anything. It's just, again, a little quirk in the schedule. But very much looking forward to this first week of Major League Balatro. And now let's go ahead and check out what is going to be the deck and the stake for Game 1 across the board. All right, so first we have our deck, and the spin is in. We have every single of the 15 decks selected here, and we're going to start off things a little vanilla. We get red deck for our deck. Now moving on to the stake. So we have red deck in the stake that is going to be played in week 1. No way. All right, we have a very vanilla duo of red deck, white stake to kick things off in Major League Balatro Season 3. Maybe this is a great start, especially for all the competitors who are going to be new to the game. So red deck, white stake is your randomly selected duo for week 1. This will be the first game in every single matchup for week 1. Of course, we will respin the wheel next week for a different combination of deck and stake for game 1 in week 2. Also, quickly, our fantasy preview. This is a reminder that there is still time to sign up before week 1 for the Major League Balatro fantasy game. I'll have the link in the description below. You can also find the link on MajorLeagueBalatro.com. MajorLeagueBalatro.com is where you're going to find all the information this season. But I do want to note, you could join any time during the year. However, if you want a chance at that year-long prize and not just the weekly prizes, you likely have to sign up before week 1 because you're going to have to start earning points every single week. So let's go ahead and take a look at what my lineup is and just a quick overall look at the prices for week 1. So for week 1, in that top tier price range of $8, we have the 2 highest scores in the fantasy game last year, myself and Bean. In that next tier, we're going to have 3 $7 players. We have DrSpectred, Vagabond, and Roffle. DrSpectred and Roffle scored very well last year. Vagabond is a top tier multiplayer player, so I had to put them in the pricier range. We move on to the above average range of $6. BelenosBear, Edzy, same story as Roffle and Doc. And then you have Sizaak, again, a new player who is very skilled at Balatro. Then we have a load of people in the $5 middle tier. We got Feinberg, Rarran, Fur, and Haelian. $4, we have Seadubbs, MALF, Skoottie. At the $3 tier, we have the returnees of Nandre, Gothic, Lord, NEATO. And then at $2, we have Nemo and HCJustin. So, for my team this week, I'm going with myself. I love picking myself in fantasy. I love, ride or dying with those who are choosing to select me for their fantasy game. I got Feinberg. I think Feinberg against Gothic Lord is going to be a very interesting matchup. But I think we saw Feinberg in the tag team matchup just knows how to put up insanely high scores, so I really like that choice there. Rarran, my boy, he is a similar player where not only does Rarran win a lot, which is very crucial in the fantasy point system, of course, 1 point for the match win, 1 point per game win, and lives remaining, but Rarran often puts up those very high scores and tends, I think, to go after maybe the lower stakes. And then Nemo. I know Nemo is taking on Roffle. That is one of the toughest matchups you can have. I think people may underestimate how incredibly good NEATO is already at Balatro and is going to get even in a very short amount of time with some practice. And I think Nemo this week could not only upset Roffle, but again, put up very high scores and help pad those fantasy stats. So that's my lineup. Now let's get into the previews of every single game. For game one, we have Feinberg versus Gothic Lord UK. This game, really interesting in my humble opinion, because I think this game is really going to set the tone for both these players heading into Major League Balatro Season 3. I think Feinberg and Gothic Lord is a very even matchup, and both players are going to see this as a game that they want to win to kind of establish themselves maybe in that upper tier of the Onyx division in the playoff contention. I think this is kind of around where we're going to see the playoff line lie, is going to be around where Feinberg or maybe Gothic Lord ends up in the standings. So already going into week one, this is a huge matchup for these two players who are going to be gunning for that playoff spot. In terms of deck and stake, I'll be honest, we saw Feinberg just absolutely dominate the higher stakes in the tag team event. And when I've watched Feinberg play Balatro, Gothic is known for going towards those purple stakes if it ends up being their choice for the latter games. I don't think that's a great choice for Gothic here. I think Gothic actually got the advantage with it being a white stake red deck selection for the random game. The fact that it's lower, I think Gothic plays well basically on every stake, and he just likes to make their opponent uncomfortable, and I don't think Feinberg would be uncomfortable with higher stakes. In fact, I think it may be more uncomfortable to play the white stake game where it's all about the min-max of it all at every single turn, where Gothic has really had that experience playing Major League Balatro, knowing in multiplayer that's what you have to do. So I feel like Gothic may have the edge in that game one. I'm curious to see where Feinberg would take it if that were to be the case in game two. But regardless, I think it's going to be a very even matchup. I do think the keys to look out in this game is how Feinberg min-maxes on the lower stakes. That is going to be the crucial part of it. We saw Feinberg build an incredible Barren Mine build. We saw them navigate blinds beautifully. But does Feinberg kind of find the path if it's not a high card seed, which the multiplayer community loves to joke that every seed is a high card seed, but often we've seen a Major League Balatro, especially with Glass available to you since we play with very vanilla rules, that the retrigger builds is really how you kind of get that high score in such a limited amount of time, where you're only really going to play 8 ENTs with 4 lives apiece. Moving on to DrSpectred and MALF. This has become a classic matchup in Major League Balatro. So these two have found themselves in the same division 3 straight seasons, and it has been just one of the best matches of the year each and every time. Year one, we're so close to a MALF upset when we had an all-time great play by DrSpectred deciding to skip with their seltzer at a time that they weren't sure if that would really be enough points to put up. It turned out to be the correct decision. I think white stake red deck heavily favors Doc, and that's not because MALF couldn't play it. I think MALF is actually going to make the game very close, but MALF wants to play gold stake. We all know that MALF wants the kind of tempo play to be their angle to come out victorious, and I am sure if DrSpectred does indeed end up taking game one, MALF is immediately going to take it to higher stakes. Now, DrSpectred, I think this year, may throw a curveball at their opponents, where Doc is notorious for playing slow, up until recently, where Doc has done this gold stake streaking, all the Nan Imp speedruns. DrSpectred has learned how to click the buttons rather fast. And I actually think MALF is a very meticulous player, so I don't think anybody really wants timer to be a huge factor in Major League Balatro Season 3. but all players are going to be using the timer just to keep things on schedule. And I do think that could be a little bit of a factor. What I will note is for sure where I thought maybe Doc may get pressured by a timer once or twice last season. That is just not going to be the case this year. But all in all, I think we're going to have very close games. I think MALF could definitely steal higher stakes selections off of DrSpectred, and I'm very much looking forward to this game going head-to-head again. Game 3 is maybe my choice for game of the week. There's a lot of good games. I think I'm just so excited for Major League Balatro Season 3. I think all season you're going to have incredible matchups. BelenosBear versus Sizaak. I think these are two players that are some of my favorite Balatro to watch. BelenosBear, always highly competitive, as we saw, was very close to taking out Bean last year in the semifinals, which wouldn't have allowed Bean to even play in the finals, which he would have went on and won. So I'm curious to see how BelenosBear would have done in those finals, but more importantly, taking on another multiplayer maestro in Sizaak. Sizaak is arguably one of the top 10, top 5 multiplayer players in the world. Very, very meticulous with their decision making, can play kind of slow, but I think BelenosBear is right there with them. I think we have two players kind of colliding from different worlds of the Balatro sphere, where BelenosBear knows everything about Balatro. They know every little quirk, every little mechanism. That is kind of the content BelenosBear creates, but they are so good at multiplayer and so good at just consistently making the most probable decision, the best decision at every single moment in Major League Balatro. I think BelenosBear is going against the one person I could say probably does it just as well in Sizaak. So you're going to have this game where it's two people, I just think, consistently making the right decision. And you're going to see this game come down to very minor things. I think slightly favor Sizaak just because of more multiplayer experience and those little interactions of like when to use a tarot card and not. But again, that is what I've always hailed about what is so good about Bear in Major League Balatro, and the reason Bear keeps showing up late in the playoffs and winning games is because Bear makes these little correct decisions that not everybody does in Major League Balatro. So I think this is going to be a fantastic game. I think we're going to see lower stakes throughout, especially with game 1 being on red-white. I think we'll maybe get a more interesting deck choice for game 2 and 3, but I think we're going to see lower stakes. And if you are around, because this game is a little bit later in the evening, I highly recommend you check it out. I think you're going to be thoroughly entertained, and I think this is going to be one of my favorite ones to commentate because there's just going to be so much to go over in terms of all the small decisions and the different paths that these two players take in the game. But those two different paths may be stemming from very minor different decisions where there might have even been a right and wrong between those choices. Moving on to the first game of Wednesday, we have myself versus HCJustin. Justin's second season in Major League Balatro. Some great experience under his belt. And as we saw towards the end of the season with Justin's first victory in very competitive games, Justin consistently felt like the entire season they were one or two little decisions away from winning games. And it really just came down to Justin realizing all the scoring should be coming from your re-triggers, whether that is high card with Baron Mime and Chariots and whatnot, or it's coming from, glass cards and Bloodstone, Ancient, something like an Idol. And I'm a little scared in this game because I think Justin has figured that part out, figured out that something like a Photo Chad is just always going to be better with that X or that 8X mult over something like a Lucky Cat, because other than those, let's not say they're small decisions, they're big decisions. Those are the jokers you're selecting for your scoring. But at the end of the day, it was like one or two decisions. Everything else about Justin's gameplay was fantastic. The ability to build into economy with gold cards is something I felt Justin did really, really well. Knowing that Luckies are not just for scoring, that they're going to make you money with something like a Chad. This was all really good decision-making by Justin. I do think that Justin probably stays on the lower S stakes, though I really don't know what Justin's strategy is going to be going into this season. I feel confident with red deck white stake. I think I am just someone who really, really can make the most out of that extra discard on a lower stake where we can just get so much value out of the blinds because blinds are really easy to get out of. But after that game, It really depends where Justin wants to take it. I would not be shocked if Justin tries to take me to a higher stake where I'm a lot more uncomfortable. And in that sense, I'll have to figure out what deck I want to play. But yeah, I think the key to this game, if you're a viewer and you're spectating, because this is the one game I won't be casting, is pay attention to Justin's Joker decisions. I really think they actually do a really good job with deck manipulation, the tarot cards, when to open packs. Justin kind of has all that in the bag. Really, Justin just needs to know when to hold them and when to fold them, for the lack of a better term, with Jokers. For example, maybe holding on to too many Econ Jokers and not grabbing something like a Photo Chad when you're low on lives, right? You need to start clawing your way back, is another thing that maybe we saw a lack from Justin last season. So it's all going to come down, I think, to Joker decisions on Justin's side, but I would not be shocked for an upset in this game. Haelian versus Fur will be our final game on Wednesday, February 11th. I think this is another game for contender of Game of the Week. I think both these players are just ridiculously evenly matched. I think Fur showed towards the end of the season they are one of the top players in this league. They learned so much, even though early on the season there were plenty of times that they could have taken a game off of someone like a DrSpectred, someone like a Bean. They just consistently played above what I think people expected out of Fur. And Haelian kind of has that skill level about them. I think they're very evenly matched when it comes to Balatro and the decision-making process, where we see Haelian, notoriously Roffle's kryptonite, just consistently taking out Roffle. Fur, very close to taking out Bean last season. So these are two players that are not just really good at Balatro, but can often take matches off of the best players in this league. What I am curious is where Fur goes with deck and stake choice if Haelian happens to win red deck white stake with game one. But let's talk about that. I think on white stake, I give a slight nod to Haelian, but I say that as almost like a first stand in Major League Balatro. I think Fur is so good, so talented, but I think Fur really excels when there's maybe some tougher choices, if you will, where knowing when to take an Eternal or not take an Eternal on black stake or higher. I think Haelian is, if not the best, because we have the likes of Bean and maybe like Vagabond and Sizaak in this league, one of the best players at manipulating their deck and getting their deck into a state to score the max amount of points. I mean, just phenomenal at that. And it's red deck white stake where I think that is priority number one. So I think Haelian has a slight advantage in the first one. I think going from there, Fur may force some just slightly higher stakes, and then I think Fur makes maybe slightly better decisions when it comes to Joker roster or when to open packs or how to navigate the scoring on the slightly higher stakes to still min-max the blind. So this is going to be a very good game. Don't miss it, and really pay attention to the deck manipulation in game one with red deck white stake. I think that is going to be critical on if Fur can match Haelian on that deck manipulation for Fur to take the victory there. Now for our first game on Thursday, February 12th, we have NEATO versus Bean in the Onyx division. I think we have our former champion Bean, and we have NEATO, who wasn't able to make the playoffs last season. And I do think going into this first game with the Bean red deck white stake, this is right up Bean's alley. This is probably Bean's second favorite combination or third favorite combination of deck and stake in the game. So I do think Bean is going to be heavily favored going into game one. That's not to say that NEATO could not pull off an upset. I think especially with NEATO's really good ability at deck manipulation and creating glass cards. But I think where NEATO can shine in this match is taking it to higher stakes on Bean for game two, seeing if they can get a win there, and then we'll see where game three goes. But I think purple stake was kind of the sweet spot for NEATO in the first two seasons of Major League Balatro. I think that's going to continue, where you have those tougher decisions with Eternal Jokers and higher rising stakes or score requirements in the blinds, which means people like Bean, who just want to min-max everything in blind, have a little bit of trouble and can sometimes lose a life to a small blind or a big blind, opening the door for a tempo route for a player like NEATO. So while I do think game one, Bean, in the crazy amount of min-maxing that you'll see from Bean on something like a red deck white stake, does give them a favorable advantage, I think game two and game three, if we see higher stakes, that is where NEATO can all of a sudden very easily take some games off of Bean and maybe even take this match. Edzy versus Nandre, second game on Thursday, also in the Onyx division. We have a rematch. These two players were in the same division for the first 2 seasons, find themselves in the same division for the 3rd season. It has always been a pleasure. These players also played in the playoffs of season 1, so this is actually the 4th matchup between Edzy and Nandre, and it's always an extraordinarily entertaining one. Nandre loves to play extraordinarily fast, which I do think Edzy may struggle with. Maybe we see some timer pressure in this game, but we also know that Nandre loves the higher stake route with random deck ideas. And while Edzy is a gold stake star when it comes to single player, Edzy has really gravitated to the lower stakes, in my opinion, when it comes to multiplayer. So I do give Edzy the slight advantage for our random with what ended up being red deck white stake. But Nandre, I'm sure is going to take it to something like Plasma or just guaranteed gold stake when it gets to game 2 if Nandre were to lose game 1. I think Nandre, you will see often trying to force the high card line, which, while not as consistent, I think, in Major League Balatro as it would be with the ranked rule set. For those who don't know, the rule set that the multiplayer community on their Discord uses is different than the Major League Balatro rule set. That's just a side note. It can be devastating for Edzy if Nandre commits to a high card angle. And even on red deck white stake, sometimes you can get tempoed by that because you don't get the scoring, you don't get enough glass cards, you don't get enough jokers like an idol or ancient, and all of a sudden that high card just outscales you in the first 4 lives and you end up with a loss. I actually think this white stake will be really interesting to see how Nandre plays, because it's so rare to see Nandre on lower stakes. They're often always taking it to higher stakes like gold stake. So curious to see what they do with all their discards, what they do with their approach for this game. But again, I think the key to this game is going to be game 2 and game 3. But this is going to be another phenomenal match to watch. And our nightcap for Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, Roffle versus Nemo. This is one of the games I'm looking forward to most. I think Roffle, one of the best Balatro players all around in the world. But we have Nemo, who not only a grand master in chess, but just fantastic at every game she picks up. And I think we saw no difference with Balatro. Nemo practiced some games against Roffle and Doc a while ago. I know it's been practicing Balatro as of late. And you could see just within a singular game, picking up the lines that you need to take in Major League Balatro, knowing that I need to build into glass cards. I need to build into one type of glass card, ideally, because we want to get idle online, or we want to be able to get the sock and busking going with a flush 5. Like, Nemo saw that line so early on that I think even in just this match, you are going to see Nemo figure things out about multiplayer Balatro and take it with her into game 2 and then into game 3. And I actually think you're going to see Nemo get better throughout this series. So for that reason, I think Roffle definitely has the advantage in game 1 and just has the advantage in general with all their experience with multiplayer. But I think game 2 and game 3 are going to be much tougher for Roffle. And I think another tough part for Roffle going into this is if they do secure game 1 in the victory with red deck white stake, where does Nemo take it for game 2? I mean, we have no information on that because Nemo hasn't been playing a ton on stream. So we don't know if Nemo's going to favor higher stakes or a certain deck and throw Roffle off. I actually think it'd be really interesting to see Nemo take this game to something like Nebula deck, where the deck manipulation is really limited and force the Joker decisions to matter more. I think that is a good strategy. However, I will say Roffle's probably one of the best competitors at Joker decisions in this tournament, so maybe not necessarily this game, but that's an angle a lot of players can take when they feel that they are maybe an underdog in a matchup. But yeah, regardless, watch out for Nemo learning from her decisions just within this first match and definitely throughout the season. But I do think an upset is absolutely in the cards in this game between Roffle and NEATO. We got Seadubbs, we got Vagabond, we got Friday the 13th, the scariest of all days, and I think this one is going to be a barn burner. I think red deck white stake to start things off does heavily favor Vagabond, who just has a lot of experience on how to approach and min-max in blinds. And again, it's not just the fact that it's white stake, which is in and of itself something that really gives an advantage to a player who tries to deck manipulate and earn economy in a blind. But the red deck, giving that extra discard, just adds to that. So I really do think if someone is favored in this game, it is clearly Vagabond. But that's not to say Seadubbs is not a phenomenal player. And I think where things may flip rather quickly is going into game 2 or game 3, where Seadubbs can either take it to an interesting stake. And despite Vagabond being a good high stakes player in multiplayer, gold stake is its own beast with the rentals. And we often see Vagabond, aim for that purple stake. They want to play high stakes, but they don't want to deal with perishable and rental jokers, versus Seadubbs, I think, really knows how to play around those, has so much just general Balatro experience where this could be a very good angle for them. Or, like I mentioned in the Nemo Roffle game, Seadubbs could take it to a deck that is just really uncomfortable to play for someone like Vagabond, specifically a Nebula deck where you only have 1 consumable slot. Or you take it to something like Painted deck where you only have 4 Joker slots. And although Vagabond loves to play high card, that's not always the angle even on Painted deck. It really forces some odd decisions. So expect this game to, in my opinion, get kind of weird with the deck or stake choices in game 2 or game 3, while game 1 will just really be a showcase of Balatro's skill. However, I'm not saying a upset, if you would call it that, is not in the cards in game 1 with Seadubbs, because Seadubbs takes very erratic lines sometimes. And if you take an erratic line, even if it's lower probability, the one thing you have in your advantage is if that works out for you, you end up with a very high chance of victory at that point. Something like a Ouija from a Spectral pack, where I don't think Vagabond is ever taking a Ouija in a Spectral pack. Seadubbs could grab that, could get Idle online way earlier and tempo their opponent in Vagabond. So very curious to see how this one plays out. Very excited to be casting this game on Friday to kind of finish off week 1 in my subathon. And the final game of, we'll call it week 1, even though this is going to be played on Monday, February 16th, President's Day, is Rarran and Skoottie. And I think, weirdly enough, this is another one that kind of reminds me of Haelian Fur, where I think we have 2 very evenly matched players. However, I think they're evenly matched in a different regard here, where I think Rarran is kind of an elite lower stakes player. Very good deck manipulation, very good at the min-maxing. We've said this about a lot of competitors. While Skoottie is so great at higher stakes and getting out of blinds and finding tempo lines. So I do think a little unfortunate maybe for Skoottie to get red deck white stake as a random this week. However, game 2, game 3, where it is kind of up to our players, and Skoottie would get the first choice if they do indeed lose game 1, takes it to higher stakes. And all of a sudden, I think the flip scripts where Rarran feels very uncomfortable and maybe feels like the underdog going into those games, because Rarran hasn't played as much high-stakes Balatro in a multiplayer setting. And Skoottie, we just saw consistently last season, would take players to gold stake. You would see the early decisions and feel like maybe Skoottie's opponent is in a better spot, but then all of a sudden Skoottie just takes 4 lives, and it's a 4-0. And Skoottie really loves that tempo line and is very good at doing that. I think, again, Skoottie, phenomenal gold stakes player. And in that regard, these 2 players are very even, where I think, like, blue stake and up, I give the nod to Skoottie a little bit, and white stake to black stake, I kind of give the nod to Rarran. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out. We do know that the first game's already decided for them, so maybe that gives that slight edge to Rarran. But watch out for that. Watch out for the tempo line, even on white stake. I think Skoottie can still approach that angle towards the game. It's just a little bit more difficult to make work, because on white stake, on red deck, you're going to be able to make so much money, so many taros, that it's hard to go for, big time scoring if you're Skoottie for 5 antes without Rarran finding something that will eventually kind of pass you up and snowball you. But it's not impossible, and it is definitely an angle that Skoottie can take. And that is a wrap on your week 1 preview for Major League Balatro. I want to say a few things in this outro. Number 1, we have a huge announcement tomorrow on Monday during my Zaino's subathon to kick off Major League Balatro Season 3. I am running a little bit of a subathon, but we have some Major League Balatro announcements happening tomorrow, and maybe even a couple more throughout the week. I also want to say the site you are looking at right now, MajorLeagueBalatro.com. Link in the description. Use this. Bookmark it if you're a big fan. You will be able to get all the information you need here, and we are adding a ton more. We're going to be adding stats. We're going to be adding the ability to go into these games and click them, and them having their own page where you can find out even more information. But for the viewing experience. You come here, you'll have the schedule. You can look in CET or EST, and then you're going to be able to click right in the middle to get to the cast of the stream, or you can click on either one of these players to go to their Twitch channels to see it live. So if you know a game is happening at 5 p.m. but you forgot who's casting, go to MajorLeagueBalatro.com and just click here right in the middle. I'll be casting that one between DrSpectred and MALF. You'll be able to find the standings. You're going to be able to find news. You got links to the Blue Sky, to the fantasy game, to the merch store, to the YouTube channel. I really think if everyone can utilize this as a hub, it'll make the viewing experience phenomenal. And again, there's a ton of improvements coming to this website, even though I think Disco Art has already done a fantastic job with it, and it's a phenomenal site already. So those are kind of things I want to go over. Thank you all for making Major League Balatro Season 1, Season 2 a success. I really hope we see the same thing for Season 3. I am so stoked, and I cannot wait to be casting all these games for Week 1 and, of course, participating once again. So that's it from me. You may see some fresh faces, actually, for the preview and recap episodes going forward. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But for now, that's all from me. Can't wait to see you in stream or in the YouTube comments watching the VODs. And until next time, Zaino signing out.